The hallway was narrow, every echo of footsteps striking like a drumbeat against the walls. 3 shadows closed in, their whispers cutting sharper than knives, feeding on the certainty they would not be stopped. At the center stood a girl who had learned too soon that silence is an open door for cruelty. Her pulse thundered, her breath caught. The next heartbeat would decide everything, whether she would vanish into fear or ignite a storm. The first bell had not yet rung, but the air inside Hawthorne Ridge High already felt taut, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lena Brooks moved through that air with a measured pace, her shoulders square beneath the weight of a Navy backpack. At 17, her frame carried both the lithe grace of a trained fighter and the quiet stillness of someone who had learned to read a room before stepping into it. Her mother's voice still lingered in her mind from earlier that morning, spoken across the kitchen table under the dim light of a single bulb. Elaine Brooks, in her scrubs and cardigan, eyes lined with fatigue from another night at the hospital, had reached across to touch Lena's hand. "Your scholarship interview is in 2 weeks," she had said. "They will look at everything, Lena. Even one mark on your record could close that door." Lena had nodded, hiding the unease that pulsed beneath her calm expression. The statewide MMA scholarship was not just a dream, it was a way out, and now it had a clock ticking over it. By the time she stepped through the school's side entrance, the hallways at the front were already swelling with noise, lockers slamming, voices ricocheting against painted cinder block. She avoided it all, as she always did, slipping instead into the back corridor that led to the older wing. Here, the linoleum floors were scuffed, the lockers dented, and the fluorescent lights flickered in irregular intervals, like shallow breaths. Her sneakers whispered against the floor as she passed a row of unused lockers. The quiet felt safer, but she knew it was only an illusion. Her mother's warning clung to her. One misstep, one confrontation, and all the years of discipline, early mornings at the gym, bruised knuckles, the ache of endless drills, could vanish. She turned a corner. The corridor narrowed ahead, its walls pressing closer. One light above buzzed, blinking in a slow, unsteady rhythm. And there, in the shifting glow, 4 silhouettes waited. Broad-shouldered and still, blocking the way forward. Shadows clung to their faces, but the stance of each figure spoke plainly. They were not here to pass by. Lena's breath slowed, her gaze steady. The path behind her was already closing in. The storm had not broken yet, but she could feel the pressure of it in the air. The air in the narrow hallway thickened as Lena's steps slowed. She recognized them even before the details of their faces emerged from the patchwork of light and shadow. 4 figures in vivid colors, their silhouettes blocking the pale, flickering path ahead. At the center stood Chase Donovan, the grandson of Judge Harold Donovan, and a name whispered often in the halls with a mix of envy and caution. He was tall, built like the star quarterback he once was, shoulders squared under a royal blue varsity jacket with gold trim that caught the trembling fluorescent light. His chin lifted slightly as he locked eyes with Lena, a predator already sure of the outcome. To his right, Brittany Hale, Hawthorne Ridge's celebrated cheer captain, shifted her weight onto one leg, the yellow of her cheer uniform glowing against the muted wall. Her high ponytail swayed as she adjusted the strap of a small shoulder bag. One hand rested casually inside it, fingers curling around something unseen, until Lena caught the faint, telltale glint of a phone lens. On the left side, Evan Ross, broader than Chase, his green bomber jacket zipped to the throat, leaned forward just enough to shadow part of the light. His eyes narrowed in silent calculation, his lips pressed into a thin line. Closest to the lockers, half-turned as if not fully committed to the tableau, stood Colby Myers. His forest green hoodie was loose on his frame, hands buried in its front pocket. Lena noticed the quick flicker of his gaze, not at her, but to the side, down the hall behind her, as though measuring the distance to escape. Her instincts sharpened. This was no accidental meeting. The placement of their bodies formed a rough crescent, angled to draw her deeper into the choke point. She shifted her gaze upward, pretending to study the tired ceiling, and saw what they had likely counted on: an empty dome where a camera should have been, wires exposed and trailing like veins. A little farther down, another black dome was intact, but the way the wall jutted inward created a dead zone. She could stand here for minutes and remain invisible to the official record. A blind spot. Her breath slowed. She thought of her mother's voice that morning, reminding her that even one mark on her record could destroy the chance at the scholarship. This hallway was more dangerous than it looked. Here, proof would be a matter of perspective, and they controlled the angles. Chase shifted his stance, the heel of one sneaker scraping the linoleum with a low squeak. The sound was deliberate, punctuating the silence. "Morning, Brooks," he said evenly, his voice carrying the weight of entitlement rather than greeting. Lena answered only with a measured look. Words would feed them, silence might still unsettle them. Brittany's hand moved inside her bag. A faint red light pulsed against the lining for an instant before disappearing. Recording, Lena realized. They wanted a version of the story ready before the truth could take shape. Evan took a single step closer, enough to draw her attention without closing the gap completely. His presence was like a wall moving forward, slow but inevitable. Then Colby's eyes met hers. For a heartbeat, she saw hesitation there, his gaze flicked downward, his shoulders tightening as though he might step aside. But before he could shift, Chase's head turned slightly. A single, almost imperceptible nod, the kind only someone in control would give to an uncertain accomplice. Colby's weight shifted back into place. The circle held. Inside Lena, two currents clashed. One urged her to retreat, to take the long way around, to protect the fragile paper walls of her clean record. The other, the one honed through hours on the mat, through the discipline of breath and stance, warned that turning her back would give them what they wanted, a victory without effort. She adjusted the straps of her backpack, keeping her movement slow. The strap bit into her shoulder as if reminding her that every second here was a risk. "Funny place for a walk," Chase remarked, glancing deliberately at the dead camera dome above. Quiet, private. Brittany smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on her phone's screen inside the bag. Evan shifted again, the edge of his shoe almost touching the beam of light that separated him from Lena. Colby looked away, focusing on some invisible mark on the floor. The hallway hummed with the buzzing of the lights, each flicker cutting their faces into fragments. An eye caught in brightness, a jawline swallowed in shadow, a smirk illuminated for only a breath before darkness claimed it again. Lena felt her pulse in her throat, steady but strong. She measured their positions, noted the narrow gap between Evan and the lockers, saw how Brittany's stance left one leg forward. All of it filed away. Chase tilted his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Well," he said at last, the corners of his mouth curling upward, "let's make a little video." The sentence hung in the air like the first crack of thunder. The fluorescent light above gave a sharp buzz and dimmed, leaving the hallway in a jittering half-light. Chase's smile froze in place, but his eyes sharpened, locking onto Lena's face. Without warning, he stepped forward and turned his shoulder, his arm swinging past her cheek like a striking snake. The crook of his elbow hooked around the front of her neck, and in one swift pull, the space between them collapsed. Her first instinct, trained, drilled into her through years of MMA practice, was to drop her hips, plant her feet, and break the hold with a turn of her body. She saw the opening in her mind as clearly as if she were on the mat. But another image rose in the same breath. Her mother's tired eyes at the kitchen table, the scholarship letter's fragile promise, the reminder that even one mark on her record could be enough to make it all vanish. Her lungs clenched against the pressure. The choke was not the clean technique of a sparring partner. It was messy, raw, and meant to humiliate. His forearm pressed into her windpipe, the coarse fabric of his varsity jacket scraping her jaw. She tried to inhale and found only a thin thread of air, enough to keep her standing but not enough to steady her heart. A dull roar filled her ears. It was not sound, not exactly. It was the blood pounding against the walls of her head, the muted drumbeat of her own pulse. Her vision narrowed, colors blurring at the edges, until the world was reduced to the corridor's dim geometry and the ring of faces around her. Brittany had stepped back just enough to frame them in the view of her phone, one hand steady inside her bag, lens tilted upward to catch Lena's struggling face and Chase's tightened jaw. The screen's faint glow lit her chin from below, giving her an almost theatrical air. Evan stood to the side, lips curved in a small, satisfied grin. Colby's posture had stiffened. His gaze flicked between Lena and the empty dome of the broken camera above them. His hand stayed in his hoodie pocket, but his weight shifted from one foot to the other, betraying a silent unrest. Lena's thoughts came in flashes between the struggle for air. Keep your spine straight, do not twist yet. Control your balance. Breathe, if you can. The last command mocked her. Each time she tried to draw in breath, The space in her throat seemed to close further. Chase's voice was hot against her ear. "Come on," he murmured, low enough that the recording might not catch it. "Show them what you can do." He wanted her to fight back. He wanted the footage of her breaking free, proof that could be cut into a story of aggression. If she reacted with all she had, she would give them exactly what they needed to ruin her. The flicker of light above broke rhythm, plunging them into shadow for a full second before snapping back. In that darkness, she felt the full absence of breath, a suffocating silence inside her own body. A new sound cut through, the sharp, commanding voice of an adult. "Chase Donovan, let her go right now." Miss Vargas's heels clicked rapidly against the linoleum as she came into view from the far end of the hall. Her dark hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, and her eyes blazed with recognition and anger. Chase released Lena instantly, stepping back with exaggerated innocence, palms raised halfway. Lena staggered a single step, catching herself before she could fall. Her throat throbbed. Air rushed in, harsh and cold, scraping against the rawness left behind. Brittany was quick. She withdrew her hand from the bag, phone screen already locked, and stepped toward Miss Vargas with a wide-eyed look. "We were just trying to talk to her," she said, her tone pitched high, laced with disbelief. She attacked Chase out of nowhere. "That is not what I saw," Miss Vargas replied, moving to place herself between Lena and the group. "She came at me," Chase added, his voice calm, as though explaining to a reasonable listener. "I just stopped her from hitting me." His gaze flicked sideways at Brittany, unspoken coordination passing between them. Evan gave a small shrug, as if confirming the story, while Colby looked down at his sneakers. Lena's breathing began to steady, but the ache in her throat pulsed with each inhale. She wanted to speak, to call out the lie for what it was, but the thin rasp of her voice would betray the struggle she had just endured, and she would not give them that satisfaction here. Miss Vargas's eyes moved from Lena's face to the small red indentation along her neck, then back to Chase. Her jaw tightened. She turned to Lena, her voice lowering so only she could hear. "You have to be careful," she said, each word deliberate. "You do not know what you are up against." The hum of the flickering light filled the pause between them, and somewhere in that uneven glow, Lena understood. This was not over, and the air here would only get harder to breathe. The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile and the starch of freshly laundered scrubs. The house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock and the soft hiss of the heating vents. Lena set her backpack down by the back door, as if the weight of it might wake something sleeping in the air. Elaine Brooks sat at the table with her hair pulled back in a loose scarf, still in her hospital uniform from the night shift. She was writing something in a spiral-bound notebook, the corners of the pages worn from constant use. "You are home early," Elaine said without looking up. "Study group was canceled," Lena answered quickly. The words slid out before she could think about them too much. Her voice was steady, but her throat still held the dull ache of Chase's grip, a bruise forming just beneath the collar of her shirt. Elaine capped her pen and looked at her daughter for the first time. There was a knowing softness in her gaze, the kind that could strip away half-truths, but she said nothing. Instead, she poured Lena a glass of water and slid it across the table. Lena sat down, letting the cool rim touch her lips. She wanted to tell her mother about the hallway, about Miss Vargas stepping in, about the way Brittany's phone had been hidden inside her bag. But each version she rehearsed ended in her mother's shoulders tightening. In the shadow of disappointment, in the reminder that one wrong move could shut the door to the scholarship forever. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was an unknown number. The message was short, written in block capitals. "Walk away, or we will make you disappear too." The letters seemed to pulse on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the delete icon, but something in her froze. She remembered the whispers from last year about a girl named Marisol Vega, a sophomore with quick eyes and a louder laugh than most. Marisol had accused a popular group of harassment in the locker room. She filed a complaint with the administration, and for a while, there had been talk, students speaking out, some teachers privately showing support. Then, without explanation, Marisol's family moved away in the middle of the semester. The complaint disappeared from the school records. Her name was scrubbed from the yearbook draft. It was as if she had never been there. Lena had not thought about Marisol in months, but the memory was now a sharp stone lodged in her chest. She pushed the phone face down on the table, careful not to let her mother see the glow of the screen. Elaine picked up her notebook again. "Your interview packet came in the mail," she said. They sent the final list of requirements. Lena reached for the thin envelope resting beside the fruit bowl. She slid out the printed form, scanning the lines until her eyes caught on one phrase near the bottom. Applicant must maintain a record free of disciplinary action for a period of 12 consecutive months prior to the date of award. The words tightened around her like a second chokehold. She traced them once more, the weight of them heavy in her lungs. One incident, one accusation. Even without proof, the stain of it would be enough to disqualify her. She imagined Chase's voice in the hallway. "Let's make a little video." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from a different contact, one she recognized. The name Kendra appeared on the screen, a girl from chemistry class who rarely messaged her directly. Lena opened it. It was a link to a private group chat, the kind reserved for select students who traded gossip faster than the announcements board could keep up. A still frame loaded on her screen. It was her, shoulders hunched, mouth open in mid-breath, Chase's arm around her neck. The angle was tilted, the moment cropped so it looked as if she were lunging forward rather than being pulled back. Beneath it, the caption read, "Brooks loses it in the hallway. Drama queen much?" Her pulse quickened. She scrolled further, short clips stitched together, each one framed to suggest aggression. Each one cut before the truth could be seen. Comments stacked beneath, some mocking, others feigning concern. Brittany's username appeared in the list of people who had liked the post. Lena's fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. The ache in her throat flared again, but this time it was not just from Chase's chokehold. Across the table, Elaine was writing again, oblivious to the storm gathering in Lena's hands. The hum of the heating vent filled the silence. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street, muffled by the walls. Inside, Lena stared at the screen, watching the false story spread pixel by pixel, as if she were already being erased and rewritten. Somewhere, behind all of it, she imagined Brittany smiling in that quiet, calculated way, Chase leaning against a wall as if nothing had happened, Evans smirking at the shadows, and Colby, eyes shifting, saying nothing at all. The glass of water sat untouched beside her. And in the narrow space between one breath and the next, Lena knew this would not be the last time they tried to cut off her air. The day after the video appeared in the private group chat, Lena moved through the halls with a different kind of stillness. She no longer looked at the floor when she walked, but neither did she challenge the stares that followed her. The silence she carried was a deliberate shield, one that kept her from reacting to whispers that swelled and broke like waves against her back. At lunch, she found Noah Green sitting alone at the corner table in the library. The smell of paper and old binding glue lingered in the air, a quiet counterpoint to the noise beyond the glass doors. Noah was the editor of the school student newspaper, meticulous, precise, and as far as Lena knew, the only one willing to print stories the administration preferred to keep invisible. He looked up when she sat down, his sharp brown eyes scanning her face. "I saw what they posted," he said quietly. "It is cut to make you look guilty. I can tell." Lena did not answer immediately. She simply slid her phone across the table. The screen paused on a blurred frame of Chase's arm around her throat. "I need the whole truth," she said. "Every angle." Noah tapped his fingers against the table once before leaning closer. "You will not find it on social media. If there is anything, it will be in the school's CCTV system. But most of the cameras," he hesitated, glancing at the nearby bookshelves, "most of them are in the wrong hands." By the end of the day, Noah had arranged a meeting with Samantha Price, a junior staff member in the main office. She was known for her quiet efficiency and for keeping her head down when tempers rose in the teacher's lounge. When Lena walked into the cramped records room, Samantha was already there, locking the door behind her. "This way," Samantha whispered, motioning for them to follow. They moved through a narrow service hallway that smelled faintly of floor polish. Pipes ran along the low ceiling, hissing softly with the building's heating. At the end of the hall, Samantha unlocked a heavy steel door and led them into a small storage room. Rows of dusty cardboard boxes lined the walls, but in the center stood a metal cabinet with a keypad. Samantha punched in a code, and the door swung open to reveal a series of monitors and hard drives stacked like black bricks. "This is the main CCTV storage," she said, pulling on a pair of thin gloves. She pressed a button, and one of the screens came alive with grainy images of various parts of the school. "Most people think the feeds are archived off-site, but we keep the last 30 days here before they are transferred." Lena stepped closer. scanning the split images. She saw the front entrance, the main hall, the gymnasium, but when Samantha pulled up the feed from the back corridor where the attack happened, Lena's stomach tightened. The screen showed only an empty stretch of hallway. No Chase, no Brittany, no herself. "Blind spot," Samantha said, her tone matter-of-fact. "The camera covers this area, but the angle is blocked by that storage alcove and the light glare from the window. If you stand here," she rewound a different feed from the opposite angle, freezing it on an image of the same alcove. "You disappear from both views." Lena felt the weight of the revelation settle over her. They had chosen that spot for a reason. She was about to ask Samantha if there was anything else when the sound of footsteps echoed from the hall outside. Heavy, unhurried, drawing closer. Samantha's eyes widened. "We need to go. Now." She shut the cabinet quickly, spun the keypad to lock it, and motioned toward the side door. Noah slipped out first, Lena just behind him. They entered another corridor lined with tall lockers. The sound of the approaching steps grew louder until it filled the space between each breath. Lena turned her head and froze. Chase Donovan was walking toward them from the far end, his varsity jacket vivid under the flickering light. His gaze moved from Noah to Lena, resting on her with deliberate weight. "Well," he said slowly, "look who found the staff hall." Noah kept walking, but Lena felt Chase's shoulder brush lightly against hers as they passed. It was not enough to stop her, but enough to let her feel the message in the contact. "I know where you have been." They rounded the corner and quickened their pace until they reached the main lobby. Only then did Lena let out the breath she had been holding, her pulse loud in her ears. That evening, at home, the house was quiet again. Elaine was not yet back from her shift. Lena sat at the kitchen table, the dim light pooling on her phone. A new message appeared from an unknown number. It was a photograph. Her mother, Elaine, walking alone in the dark outside the hospital, her scarf pulled tight against the cold, a paper bag in one hand. The timestamp in the corner was from less than 20 minutes earlier. No words accompanied it. None were needed. Lena stared at the image, her chest tightening. The sound of her own breathing filled the room, shallow and deliberate. The warning was clear. And for the first time since the hallway, she felt the air around her grow thin again. The early winter air carried a brittle stillness across the athletic field. Afternoon light slanted low, gilding the empty bleachers in gold and shadow. Lena stood by the chain-link fence, her breath visible in the cold. She watched the football team's practice wind down, helmets under arms, cleats scuffing the grass, voices carrying on the wind. She was not here for the team. She was here for Colby Myers. He lagged behind the others, walking toward the locker room with the loose gait of someone conserving energy. His hoodie was pulled halfway over his head despite the bulk of his uniform. Lena stepped forward, intercepting him near the side gate. "Colby," she said, keeping her voice calm but steady. He glanced up, startled, then quickly looked toward the other players disappearing into the tunnel. "You should not be here," he muttered. "I will not take long," she replied. "I just need to ask you something, away from the others." There was a flicker in his expression, wariness, but not refusal. He followed her a few steps to where the fence met the wall, the shadows masking them from the main path. "They planned it, did they not?" she asked. "That spot in the hallway. The cameras do not see there." Colby's jaw tightened. He looked at the ground, towing a loose pebble with his cleat. "You think I do not know?" he said quietly. "I have been running with them since middle school. You do not last on this team unless you go along." "Going along is not the same as agreeing," Lena pressed. He hesitated, then exhaled. "The coaches look the other way. The parents look the other way. If you make trouble, you get benched. And for me, that means no scouts, no scholarship. My dad, he will not forgive me for losing that." His voice thinned, the weight behind it too old for someone his age. Lena stepped closer, her tone softening. "And what about your own line? The one you do not cross?" He met her gaze for a brief moment, then glanced over her shoulder. The sound of footsteps on gravel made them both turn. A trainer passed by, barely sparing them a glance. Colby adjusted his hoodie. "I cannot help you." "Not now," he said, then walked toward the tunnel. Lena stood alone by the fence, the chain links cold under her hand. She could sense it, there was doubt in him, but doubt alone would not tip the balance. Across town, in a house lined with oil paintings and dark wood paneling, Chase Donovan stood in his grandfather's study. Judge Harold Donovan sat behind a mahogany desk, reading a folded newspaper. The late sun poured through tall windows, catching the edge of the judge's silver hair. "You know why I called you in," the old man said without looking up. Chase shifted his weight. "Because someone told you about the hallway." "I heard enough," the judge replied, finally lifting his gaze. "And I will tell you this once. Our name carries weight. You do not drag it through the mud with petty fights and childish videos." "She was asking for it," Chase said. The judge's voice cut across him like a gavel. "It does not matter. You keep your record clean. You protect the family's position. The people in this town respect power, Chase, but only when it is wielded with control." Chase's hands curled into fists at his sides. "So I am just supposed to let her?" "You are supposed to remember who you are," the judge interrupted. "Your father did not hold this family together for you to squander it. Every move you make is a reflection on me, on us. Do you understand?" Chase swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." The judge leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking. "Good, now go. And do not give me another reason to have this conversation." Chase left the study with his jaw tight, the reprimand burning like acid in his chest. Outside the heavy doors, his phone buzzed. The next morning, the halls of Hawthorne Ridge hummed with a different current. Whispers slid between lockers. When Lena stepped into homeroom, eyes turned toward her, not with the contempt of the week before, but with something more complicated. She found out why before the first bell rang. A message from Noah appeared on her phone. "Brittany is telling people you have been stalking Colby." Lena's pulse kicked. She scanned the room, spotting Brittany across the aisle, leaning in to speak to a cluster of students. Her expression was carefully arranged, half pity, half disbelief, perfect for planning a story without ever being seen as the source. By lunch, the rumor had already reached the group chat. Screenshots of Lena talking to Colby near the fence were posted, cropped to hide the empty field behind them. The caption read, "Some people just do not take no for an answer." Colby avoided her eyes in the cafeteria line. Whatever doubt she had stirred in him the day before was sealed behind a wall of self-preservation. That evening, Lena sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop casting her in pale light. A new message appeared, this one from a contact saved in her phone. Jared H. Jared had once been a junior at Hawthorne Ridge before transferring without explanation. She had only spoken to him once in the weeks before he left. The message was brief. "Chase knows you are digging. Be careful." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no reply came. The words sank into her like cold water. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches against her window. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn cut through the night air. Inside, Lena felt the circle around her tighten again. Only this time, the cracks she had seen were sealing over. And she knew the next move would not be hers. The plan had taken shape in whispers between library shelves and in the back corner of the cafeteria where no one bothered to listen. Lena and Noah knew it was a risk, showing their hand before they had enough evidence to force the truth into daylight. But every day that passed allowed Brittany's version of the hallway incident to harden into fact. They needed to catch Chase off guard, to pull something real and unfiltered from him. They chose the old science wing, where the lockers had long since been painted shut, and the air smelled faintly of metal and dust. It was a corridor just busy enough during passing periods to look casual, but quiet enough in between for words to travel. Noah set his phone to stream, the lens angled just below chest level, broadcasting to a small group of trusted watchers ready to save any useful moment. Lena stood with her back to the lockers, her posture easy, her voice low but audible. "We both know what happened in that hallway, Chase." Chase Donovan appeared from the far end as if the timing were his idea. His stride was unhurried, his varsity jacket sharp in the dim light. Brittany trailed behind him, phone in hand but held low, scanning the scene with practiced detachment. "I know you like to think so," Chase replied, a faint smile tracing his mouth, "but that is not how the school sees it." His eyes flicked to Noah's hands, to the unnatural way he cradled his phone. Recognition flashed in his expression, but his voice never faltered. "You should be careful making accusations you cannot back up." He kept his tone measured, each word weighed before release. It was like watching someone navigate a path marked with tripwires. He knew there was danger here, and he would not give them the soundbite they wanted. Lena's heartbeat picked up. She took a step forward, closing the distance, her shadow overlapping his on the wall. "You are careful now," she said quietly, But you were not that careful when you had your arm around my neck. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pride, defiance, but then it was gone, smoothed over like a crease pressed from fine fabric. He shrugged. I was stopping you from hurting someone, that is all. Noah's eyes met Lena's briefly. There was nothing here they could use, nothing that would shift the balance yet. When the bell rang, the hallway began to fill with students, their footsteps and chatter swelling until the air felt crowded. Lena inhaled, but it did not feel like enough. She thought of the official complaint form she had filed 3 days earlier, still unanswered. She thought of the closed door in the main office, the secretary's polite but blank expression when she asked for an update. The path forward was blocked at every turn. Every corridor, in the physical building and in the system itself, seemed to loop back into silence. It was like trying to breathe in a room where the windows had been nailed shut. That afternoon, Samantha Price sat across from a woman in the Human Resources office, the blinds drawn against the pale winter light. A folder lay open between them, pages neatly stacked. You accessed restricted security footage without authorization, the HR representative said. Her tone was controlled, professional, but her gaze was sharp. Samantha kept her voice steady. I accessed the footage to verify a potential incident involving student safety. That is not your decision to make, the woman replied. You have violated policy. I know what I saw, Samantha said, and in her chest her pulse matched the tightness in her voice. And I know what I did not see, because the camera does not show it. If the school chooses to leave those blind spots in place, someone has to protect the students who walk through them. A pause stretched between them. The HR representative's expression softened by a fraction, but her voice remained firm. We will note your statement. There may still be consequences. Samantha left the office with her shoulders squared. She had made her choice, and now she would carry it. 2 days later, Lena was leaving the gym when she found Chase waiting by the doors, leaning against the frame as if it were his own front porch. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the tiled floor, cutting the space into sharp angles. You like to keep busy, he said, his voice casual, almost friendly. She kept walking. What do you want? He fell into step beside her, hands in his jacket pockets. Just thought you should know, the school festival is coming up. Lots of people. Lots of cameras. She stopped, turning to face him. And maybe it is time you learned your lesson somewhere everyone can see it. His smile was small but certain, the kind that promised intention rather than chance. Then he walked away, leaving the air behind him heavy and still. Lena stood there, pulse drumming in her ears, knowing the festival was less than a week away. The corridor ahead seemed longer than it should have been, the light at the far end thin and cold. Somewhere in the space between her heartbeats, she realized she had less time than she thought. The day of the festival arrived, draped in the scent of fried dough and the bright splash of banners strung between the brick walls. Hawthorne Ridge High felt like a different place. Laughter spilling from the open quad, music drifting from the stage, the metallic clang of games from the gymnasium. But beneath the noise, Lena could feel it, a separate current, cold and deliberate, running just for her. She had been planning for this moment since the day Chase made his promise. The hallway she had chosen was not an accident. It ran along the east wing between the art rooms and the science labs, wide enough to move in but narrow enough to trap sound. Most importantly, it was covered by 3 working CCTV cameras, each with a slightly overlapping field of view. Noah had mapped them out like a choreographer, setting the stage. Her allies were already in place. Noah leaning casually against a locker midway down, phone held low but recording. 2 other students, Lena trusted at either end of the corridor, pretending to scroll through their screens. In the crowd, Samantha had positioned herself near the main camera control room, ready to tag and secure the footage before anyone could lose it. Lena stood alone at the center of the hall, her back to the sunlit windows. She kept her breathing steady, counting the seconds. The noise of the festival faded into a dull hum behind the thrum of her heartbeat. Then they came. Chase Donovan, varsity jacket unzipped, hands loose at his sides, walking with the kind of confidence that announces itself before a word is spoken. Brittany Hale moved just behind his shoulder, her cheer uniform catching the light, a phone angled discreetly in her palm. Evan Ross shadowed the other side, his bomber jacket a dark block in her peripheral vision. They spread out as they closed the distance, the corridor narrowing with each step they took. Lena did not move. Brittany reached her first. The push was sudden but calculated, hard enough to make Lena stagger back half a step, light enough to look playful on camera if taken out of context. "Careful, Brooks," Brittany said with a mock smile. "Would not want you to lose your balance." Lena straightened, meeting Brittany's eyes for just long enough to make her smirk falter. Chase moved closer, his shadow falling across Lena's shoes. "You know," he said, voice pitched low, "I thought you would stay quiet after last time." Brittany's phone rose another inch. Evans shifted to block the light from the nearest window, casting Lena deeper into the focus of every lens trained on her. The trap was closing, which meant it was time to spring hers. Chase lunged without warning, his arm sweeping up toward her neck. But Lena had been waiting for this exact movement. She dropped her weight instantly, turning her body with precision. Instead of letting his arm lock around her throat, she slid one shoulder under, pivoted on the ball of her foot, and trapped his wrist against her collarbone. The motion was smooth, economical, one of the first escape techniques she had ever learned. She stepped back into a solid stance, controlling his arm in a way that stopped his advance without causing damage. Chase struggled against the pressure, but the angle made it impossible for him to close the distance. Evan took a half step forward, but she shifted her position to keep Chase between them. Her grip held steady, her breathing calm. The years of training whispered through her muscles. Control, not harm. Defense, not destruction. She could have twisted his arm further, forced him to the ground. She could have driven the air from his lungs the way he had stolen hers in the blind corridor. But she did not. Instead, she released the hold with deliberate slowness, stepping back into the full light of the cameras. Chase stumbled, just slightly, enough for the watchers to see. For a moment, the only sound was the whirring hum of the lights above. Then the air shifted, soft, sharp clicks as students raised their phones higher, the faint rotation of the CCTV dome overhead. Lena saw it then, the briefest crack in Chase's mask. His eyes, usually so sure, flickered with something else. Surprise, calculation, maybe even the first edge of doubt. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar hardness. But she had seen it, and so had the cameras. At both ends of the hall, her allies stayed in place, recording from angles that overlapped like a net. Somewhere above them, the school system was capturing every frame. Samantha would be tagging it right now, securing copies before anyone had a chance to erase it. Lena let the silence stretch a heartbeat longer before stepping past him, her gaze steady. The festival noise swelled again as she neared the end of the hall. But behind her, the air felt charged, as if the corridor itself had recorded the moment in its walls. Somewhere in the crowd, the truth had just been caught in its own trap. By Monday morning, the Harvest Festival was already receding into memory, its laughter, colored lights, and paper lanterns surviving only in snapshots on student phones. Yet one thing refused to fade. The hallway video. It was not just a single clip. It was a cascade. From one end of the East Wing came a shaky recording, capturing Brittany's voice sharp as glass. From the other, a cleaner shot caught the shove in full view. The school's CCTV feed, extracted frame by frame, showed the precise moment Chase closed in and wrapped his arm around Lena's throat. And then there was Noah's vantage, closer than anyone else, steady-handed, catching the shift in Lena's eyes before she moved, the twist of her body as she broke free with deliberate, practiced control. By mid-morning, the different angles had been spliced together by students who barely knew her name. They circulated through group chats, over airdrop in the cafeteria, in whispered exchanges between lockers. Each replay was like a hammer on Brittany's fragile story. The playful push she had described in her social post now played beside the footage of Lena staggering back, hand rising instinctively to protect herself. Her calm release after restraining Chase destroyed the whispered accusation that she had snapped in rage. The truth, in motion, was harder to bury than any rumor. Still, the whispers did not vanish. By third period, they wrapped the hallways like a shifting fog, admiring, mocking, suspicious. Some murmured about Lena's composure. Others muttered that she had made Chase look weak on purpose. Lena kept her eyes on the floor tiles, moving between classes as if each step were a measured beat in a song she did not want to dance to. Relief pulsed faintly under her ribs. Relief that the truth was visible, but it tangled with unease. She had learned enough in this school to know that being proven right did not always keep you safe. Across town, in the cold formality of the Donovan Estates study, Chase stood before the wide mahogany desk, hands clasped tightly behind his back. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, striking the polished wood floor, catching the silver threads in Judge Alan Donovan's hair. The man's eyes, however, reflected no warmth, only a weight that had judged countless defendants, and now turned fully upon his grandson. "I can fix this," Chase said. His voice was steady but edged, as if each word had been sharpened to a point. "I just need time." The judge's tone was slow, deliberate, the way he had spoken in courtrooms for decades. "Time will not erase what the entire school has seen, nor will it soothe the questions those clips have stirred." Chase's jaw flexed. "If the board thinks I assaulted her, my scholarship is gone." Alan Donovan leaned back, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. "Then you will make certain they think otherwise. This family does not endure humiliation. If you cannot bury the story, you will bury its consequences." The words landed heavier than any physical blow. For a moment, Chase felt something close to the pressure of that failed grip in the hallway. The sensation of losing control, of his strength slipping through his hands. The fear was quick, but it left a residue behind. In the Donovan household, weakness was a stain you scrubbed at until your skin bled. Cracks were not mended, they were hidden. That afternoon, he carried that pressure into the football office. The smell of turf and sweat still clung to the air from practice. Coach Reynolds sat at his desk, flipping through stat sheets, his brow drawn tight, not over incomplete passes or missed tackles, but over something more corrosive. "You put the team in a corner, Chase," the coach said without lifting his eyes from the paper. "The board is sniffing around, parents are calling. Some want you suspended outright. Others want it gone by Friday." Chase stood silent, waiting. Finally, the coach looked up. His eyes were not angry. They were calculating. "I'm going to give you a way out. We call it a misunderstanding. You make a public apology, just enough to sound sincere, but nothing that admits guilt," and she drops it. "I will talk to the board, remind them what losing you would do to our season. You stay on the field. We still go to state. The unspoken bargain was thick between them. Protect the team at the cost of the truth. Chase nodded, but the motion felt heavy, unnatural. He wanted the season. He needed the scholarship. But the image of that hallway, the slip in his hold, the way Lena's balance had returned faster than his, kept replaying, a humiliation that no scoreboard could erase. Lena, meanwhile, sat by the library's far window, her laptop open to a quiet war of pixels and timelines. The soft hum of the building's heating system underscored the low murmur of students scattered across the tables. Samantha had sent her the raw CCTV file, its clarity almost startling. No jump cuts, no shaky hands, just the truth, sealed in a timestamp. Noah's work was even more striking. He had layered the phone footage over the CCTV, creating a multi-angle cut that moved like a professional broadcast. The truth, captured from every perspective, left no room for ambiguity. She should have felt insulated by it, armored. But instead, her chest tightened. This was not protection. This was exposure. The more the video spread, the more it became a flag in the wind, visible to everyone, supporters and enemies alike. Her phone buzzed against the wooden table. She glanced down. An email notification lit the screen. Subject: board appearance, request for statement. She clicked, eyes sweeping through the measured language until they caught on one sentence that seemed to throb on the screen. "You are invited to present your account in a public hearing before the school board this Thursday." Invited. The word had a brittle edge. It read less like a choice and more like a summons. Her mind began turning over possibilities. A public hearing meant exposure, questions she could not control, an audience she could not read. It also meant Chase and Brittany would have their own stage. She closed her eyes for a moment. The faint hum of the heating vents filled her ears, steady and even, but her breathing had already shortened. She thought of the moments in the hallway when the air had thinned, when her own breath had felt like it was being measured against someone else's will. Now the suffocation was different. It came from knowing the fight had shifted to a larger arena. Outside, dusk began to pool across the campus. The library window reflected the first emerging stars, each one sharp against the indigo sky. Lena's reflection hovered over them, her face half lit by the glow of the laptop, half swallowed by shadow. Somewhere beyond the walls, other rooms were lit with quiet conversations, families defending their own, coaches guarding their seasons, administrators balancing truth against reputation. She clicked the laptop shut. The sound was small but final, the kind of sound that meant there was no turning away from what was next. The board wanted her voice. They would have it. But they had no idea how much truth she intended to give. The boardroom had been converted into a chamber of judgment. Rows of folding chairs filled the space where normally only a few administrators gathered, each seat occupied by parents, teachers, students, and townspeople whose expressions ranged from curiosity to simmering tension. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a flat, unforgiving brightness across the polished wood table where the school board sat in a long line. Lena stood near the back, hands clasped in front of her. She felt the heat of every eye in the room, but it was the sound that unnerved her most, a low murmur, rising and falling like the shifting tide. In her chest, her heartbeat kept a steadier, harder rhythm. Noah, standing beside her, adjusted the strap of his camera bag. "We go straight to the truth," he murmured. His tone was calm, but she could see the sharp focus in his eyes. At precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, announced in careful, deliberate words by the board chair, the hearing began. The first hour was procedural, statements about policy, reminders of respectful conduct. But the air thickened when Noah was called forward. He moved with quiet purpose, setting his laptop at the presentation stand. A large monitor behind him flickered to life, its glow cutting through the sterile light of the room. "This is unedited," Noah said, his voice carrying in the sudden hush. "Multiple angles, time stamped. It shows exactly what happened in the East Wing hallway last Friday." The first clip rolled, Brittany shoving Lena, her face sharp with challenge. The second, from the opposite angle, captured Chase stepping in, his arm hooking around Lena's neck. Gasps murmured through the room. The third, clearest of all, showed Lena's practiced defense. The shift of her stance, the precise grip to free her airway, the control in lowering Chase to the floor without harm. By the time the footage ended, the silence was total. Brittany, seated beside her parents, shifted uncomfortably. Her earlier confidence, a brightness that had carried her into the room with her chin lifted, was faltering. The board chair's voice was even but edged. "Miss Klein, you stated in your prior report that Miss Carter initiated physical contact. Do you stand by that statement after viewing this footage?" Brittany opened her mouth, closed it again. She glanced to her parents, then to the crowd. In that moment, Lena saw something shift, not in Brittany's expression, but in the air around her. A subtle pulling back. People she had counted on to fill the silence with support now looked at the floor, at their hands, anywhere but her face. Her voice, when it came, was quieter. "I might have remembered it differently." The board chair did not answer. The weight of the room answered for him. From the left side of the room, a chair scraped loudly against the floor. Colby stood. His presence was sudden and solid, the way a stone appears in the path of a rushing stream. "I want to make a statement," he said, and when the board nodded, he stepped forward. He spoke without notes. "I was there. I saw Brittany push Lena. I saw Chase grab her from behind. And I saw Lena stop it without hurting anyone." He paused, eyes sweeping the board. "I am on the football team. I know speaking here might cost me that. But I am not going to pretend I did not see what I saw." The coach, seated further back, shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. The board chair thanked Colby for his honesty. The words were formal, but Lena caught the flicker of something in the man's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of the cost in what had just been said. When Colby stepped away, a murmur rippled through the crowd again. But this time it carried a different tone, quieter, heavier, as if people were recalculating their positions. The rest of the hearing unfolded with a measured inevitability. Brittany's parents tried to reframe the altercation as a misunderstanding, suggesting Lena had overreacted. The board allowed them their say, but the weight of the video and Colby's testimony hung like an immovable stone in the center of the room. Finally, the board chair leaned into the microphone. "Given the conflicting statements and the clear public concern, we will open an independent investigation. We will review all available evidence and interview additional witnesses." His gaze swept the crowd before landing on Lena. "Until the investigation is complete, the existing suspension will remain in place, as per the district's zero-tolerance policy on physical altercations." Lena had braced herself for this. Still, the words struck with a muted force. The scholarship she had worked for, her gateway to a future beyond these hallways, was bound to her school record. A suspension, even temporary, could place it in jeopardy. The board chair's voice softened, though the decision did not. Your scholarship status will be placed on hold until the matter is resolved. It was a strange kind of cliff edge, no drop yet, but the wind was already colder. The hearing adjourned. Folding chairs scraped back, the air filled again with low conversations. Brittany slipped out a side door, her parents in close formation, the crowd parting with a notable absence of warmth. Chase followed a few minutes later, his face unreadable, his grandfather's hand on his shoulder guiding him toward the exit. Colby stood near the aisle, speaking quietly with two teammates who had approached him with hesitant looks. One of them nodded toward Lena, as if acknowledging the connection, then turned away. Noah appeared at her side. They cannot ignore what they saw tonight. Lena wanted to believe him, but she also knew that in places like this, truth and outcome were not always the same thing. She walked toward the exit, each step slow, measured, the sound of the board chair's final words still pressing against her chest. Her scholarship was not gone yet, but it was no longer safely hers. And now, every hour until the investigation ended would be another stretch of that narrow ledge, with nothing but uncertainty on either side. The official notice arrived the next morning in a thin white envelope slid under their apartment door. Lena recognized the school district seal before she even bent to pick it up. Inside, the language was cold and precise. Suspension for 5 school days, effective immediately. No acknowledgement of the hearing, no note of the board's promise to investigate, just a verdict rendered before the trial was over. Her mother, Regina, read it once in silence, then placed it on the kitchen table as if it were something fragile and poisonous at the same time. 5 days, she said slowly, her voice low. They make it sound like they are protecting the school, but all they are doing is branding you. Lena wanted to argue that it could have been worse, that she had prepared herself for worse. But the truth was, the moment she saw her mother's face, she felt the weight differently. This was not just her battle anymore. By noon, the battle had spilled into their home. It began with the first phone call, no voice at the other end, only breathing, then a click. The second came 20 minutes later, a man's voice delivering a slow, deliberate insult before hanging up. Then came the third and the fourth. Regina checked her phone and saw her private number flashing across an online forum. Someone had posted their address. Photos of their apartment door, even the color of their car, had been shared in a thread that was now hundreds of comments deep. They found me, she murmured, her fingers curling around the phone as if to crush it. That evening, when the phone rang again, Lena answered. If you think, tell your mother to keep her daughter in line, a voice said. It was steady, almost conversational, and that made it worse. Or the next visit will not be a phone call. Regina took the phone from her hand and ended the call without a word. The two of them sat there for a moment, the refrigerator humming softly in the background, their breaths shallow as though the room had thinned of oxygen. By Wednesday, the fallout had spread beyond their apartment. Samantha Reeves, the vice principal who had risked speaking privately to Lena about the inconsistencies in Brittany's account, was called into a closed meeting with the superintendent. When she emerged, her nameplate had been removed from her office door. She was reassigned to Student Services, a demotion in everything but title. That same afternoon, Noah sent Lena a text. They locked me out of the lab. She found him outside the school's journalism room, the door closed, a new padlock glinting under the fluorescent light. The press pass that had once been his badge of access now felt like a dead weight around his neck. They said it is for maintenance, he said bitterly. But I heard Coach talking to Principal Harland in the hallway. He called me a problem with a camera. It was a quiet, surgical way of cutting off support, removing the allies without making a scene. The nights became the hardest part. Lena lay awake, the shadows in her room longer and darker than usual, the sound of every passing car pulling her toward the window. She began to understand why people sometimes choose silence, why they take the offered deal just to make the noise stop. On Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived from the Scholarship Council. It was not a final decision, but an offer of settlement. If she agreed to sign a statement declaring the incident a mutual misunderstanding and withdrawing her formal complaint, her scholarship review would be expedited and likely reinstated. She read the letter 3 times. The words were careful, polite, but they left no room for doubt. Justice would cost her something, and this was their way of telling her how much. She imagined signing it, The tension would dissolve. The calls might stop. Her mother could walk down the street without looking over her shoulder. Her future, college, training, the life she had fought for, would be intact. But she also imagined the other outcome. Brittany's version of events becoming the official one. Chase's arm around her neck reduced to contact in the course of an argument. Colby's testimony buried in a folder marked resolved. The choice was not abstract anymore. It was a living thing, sitting in the room with her, waiting. That night, she found her mother in the kitchen, standing at the sink, though the dishes were already washed. The window above the sink reflected her face in the darkness, tired, sharp with thought. "They sent me a letter," Lena said quietly. "The scholarship board. They want me to sign something. If I do, they will give it back to me." Regina did not turn from the window. "And if you do not, they might take it away for good." Her mother dried her hands on a towel and faced her. The overhead light caught the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the ones that deepened when she was holding back more than she said. "You have to decide," Regina said. Her voice was not unkind, but it carried a weight that made Lena's chest tighten. "You have to decide what justice is worth to you." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and unyielding. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. Lena stood there, her fingers curled around the back of a chair, her mind caught between the image of her future she had built for years and the reality of what it might cost to keep it. It felt, for the first time, like breathing itself had become expensive. The letter lay on the kitchen table like a blade turned flat. It promised quiet in exchange for silence, a future restored if Lena would sign away the truth and call it a misunderstanding. The night before, she had stood there with her mother and felt the room narrow, as if the walls had drawn closer to hear what she would decide. Morning came pale and windless. She made tea she did not drink, and watched the steam rise in thin white threads, vanishing before it reached the ceiling. Her phone lay face down beside the letter. When she finally turned it over, a dozen messages waited, most of them from unknown numbers. She scrolled past the noise to find the one that mattered. Noah's name. A single line. "Whatever you choose, I am with you." She breathed once, long and slow, until the ache in her throat softened. Then she picked up a pen, not to sign, but to write. She wrote to the Scholarship Council in sentences that were steady and plain. She thanked them for considering her. She declined the settlement. She affirmed her original statement. She added one line she had not planned, a sentence that arrived as if it had been waiting for her hand. "I cannot accept a future that requires me to erase what happened to me." She printed the letter at the library when it opened. She walked to the post office and slid the envelope through the metal mouth. It fell with a sound so small she almost doubted she had heard it. But when she stepped back into the winter light, the air tasted different, like the first breath after a long dive. There was no music in what followed, no sudden wash of relief. The calls did not stop that day. A few grew uglier before they faded. Yet the rhythm of her life resumed, one measured step after another. She returned to the gym on the edge of town, the one that smelled like old leather and disinfectant in the faint iron of sweat. The mats were cool beneath her bare feet. She wrapped her hands and began with breath, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, until the noise inside her quieted to a manageable murmur. Word traveled faster than she could have predicted. A guidance counselor who had watched the hearing from the back sent a cautious message. "If you ever wanted to teach basic safety to younger students, I have a list of names." A custodian who had cleaned the East Wing for 20 years placed a coffee can on the counter of the corner deli with a handwritten sign that said Lena's Fund. Noah built a page that explained, without accusation, what a paused scholarship meant for tuition deposits and training fees. Small donations appeared like scattered stars. $5 from a paraeducator, 10 from a bus driver, 20 from a woman who did not sign her name. Samantha came to the first open session Lena announced, a free class on a Saturday afternoon at the gym. She stood near the door, sleeves rolled, eyes watchful. "If anyone gives you trouble about the space," she said, "tell them to come to me. They already took my title. They cannot take my backbone." 10 students arrived that first day. They were uncertain at first, standing in a crooked line, shoes in their hands, laughter low and fragile. Lena bowed them onto the mat and taught them how to stand without teetering, how to turn their hips as if each step belonged to them. She showed them where to put their hands if someone reached for their throat. She taught them the difference between breaking a hold and breaking a person. Self-defense is not a victory dance, she said. It is a way to breathe when someone tries to take your air. Midway through the class, the door opened again. A figure stood backlit against the winter brightness. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Colby stepped inside, his forest green hoodie against the white of the wall, his hands empty. He removed his shoes without a word and joined the end of the line. A low ripple moved through the room, the kind that follows any unexpected shift in weather. Lena nodded to him as if she had been expecting him all along. When she paired students to practice grip breaks, she walked to Colby last. "Thank you for what you did," she said quietly. "At the hearing," he swallowed. "They cut me from the team. I know. My father barely speaks to me at dinner." A small, rueful breath. "He says I threw away a future." "What do you think you threw away?" she asked. He held her gaze for the first time with something like steadiness. "A lie," he said. "I think I threw away a lie." She showed him the same technique she had used in the festival hallway. Shoulder inside the crook of an arm, step and turn, pressure precise enough to create a path, not to cause pain. He hesitated the first time, then found the angle on the second. When he exhaled, it sounded like relief. By the end of the hour, the room had changed. It was not louder, but the air felt fuller. Students who had walked in with their shoulders tight left a little taller. Samantha erased the chalkboard and lingered beside the front desk, chatting with two girls who asked if they could bring their younger brothers next week. As the small crowd thinned, Noah arrived with a battered camera bag and a roll of poster paper. He had designed a flyer for the class, clean and simple. Free community self-defense, Saturdays, all welcome. He taped one copy behind the front window and handed the rest to Lena. "The deli is asking for more coffee cans," he said with a half smile. "Apparently people like to put cash in metal." The gym emptied to quiet. Lena swept the mats, one line after another, the bristles whispering like rain. Her mother appeared near closing, a wool hat pulled over her hair, and the careful brightness of someone who has made it through a hard day and does not want to bring the weight of it inside. She watched Lena work for a moment, then stepped onto the mat in her socks and stood there, looking at the open space. "You wrote to them," she said at last. "I did." Her mother nodded. "Then we will live with what comes." They walked home together through the early dusk. Storefronts lit their windows as if creating a path. At the deli, a man behind the counter waved and pointed to the coffee can. It was almost full of crumpled bills and coins that shone like small, practical stars. Lena pressed her palm to the cool plastic lid, as if to bless the hands that had placed their quiet votes for her future. That night, the apartment felt less like a shelter and more like a place where a person might begin again. They ate soup at the small table. The phone rang twice and went to voicemail. No one spoke of fear. They spoke of schedules, of the next class, of a list of names that had already grown longer than the mat could hold. When the dishes were done, Lena's phone vibrated with a number she did not recognize. For a moment, she considered letting it pass, letting the silence hold. Then she answered. A girl's voice filled the line. It was soft at first, then steadied. "Is this Lena Brooks?" "Yes." "My name is Mia," the girl said. "I just moved here. They found me in the locker room today. They told me not to tell anyone." There was a pause, a breath that shivered down the wire. "They are coming after me next." The words did not fall like a threat. They landed like a bell, clear and undeniable. In the quiet that followed, Lena could hear the small sounds of a life on the other end of the call. A television murmuring in another room, the squeak of a chair, a person, somewhere nearby, holding her breath. "Where are you?" Lena asked. Her voice was calm, the way it had been on the mat when she named each step. "Are you safe right now?" "I am at home." "Good. I want you to come to the gym on Saturday. You do not have to speak if you do not want to. Just come. I will meet you at the door." "Okay," the girl whispered. "Thank you." When the call ended, the room was very still. Lena stood by the window and looked out at the city. Streetlights threw their soft circles on the pavement. In one of those circles, a cat crossed, a small shape moving with careful certainty. Wind tugged at a banner left from the festival, the fabric lifting and falling like a sleeping chest. Her mother joined her and rested a hand between Lena's shoulder blades. "There will be more," she said. It was not a warning. It was a truth spoken without fear. "I know. Then you must choose over and over how you will breathe." Lena pressed her palm to the cool window pane. The glass held the faint imprint of her hand, a translucent echo that faded as quickly as a clouded breath. She closed her eyes and drew air in, slow and full, until her ribs pressed against her palms. She let it go with the same care. She thought of the first choke in the blind corridor, of the way light had flickered, as if unsure whether to show or hide. She thought of the festival hallway where she had chosen control over retaliation. She thought of the boardroom, where the truth had found a voice, even if the cost of speaking had not yet been paid in full. She thought of the coffee cans, the quiet coins, the small notes with no signatures. She thought of Colby's awkward exhale when the hold finally opened and air came back of its own accord. Then she opened her eyes. The night did not part for her. It did not promise victory or a simple path. But it did what night always does. It waited. It made room for what would come next. Lena turned from the window and picked up the stack of flyers Noah had left. She sorted them into neat piles. She placed one on the kitchen table for her mother to take to work. She put another by the door to deliver to the library in the morning. She slid the rest into her backpack. The zipper's soft rasp sounded like a curtain drawn back before a stage. At the threshold, she paused and took one more breath, not because she needed it, but because she chose it. The breath did not belong to the hallway that had tried to take it, or to the office where a bargain had been offered, or to the rumor that had attempted to make of her a story someone else could edit. It belonged to her. Somewhere a phone would ring again. Somewhere a girl would hide in a bathroom stall and consider vanishing. Somewhere a boy would learn the cost of keeping quiet and decide if he could afford it. Somewhere a door with a coffee can beside it would open. Lena lifted her chin and stepped forward, the air moving with her, patient and present, as if the world itself were an enormous lung that had remembered, at last, how to fill. Some stories end with applause. Others end with silence so complete you can hear the beat of your own heart. Lena's story ends with neither. It ends with a breath. Not the frantic gasp of someone escaping, nor the shaky inhale of someone barely holding on, but the deliberate, steady breath of someone who has chosen to keep standing, no matter how uneven the ground. Because in the end, that is what courage truly is. It is not a moment in front of a crowd, nor a single act of defiance captured on a trembling phone camera. It is the choice to keep showing up, to the mat, to the truth, to the life you deserve, long after the moment that forced you to fight has passed. The bruises will fade, the headlines will be replaced, but the quiet strength you build when no one is watching, that stays. And sometimes that strength becomes a lifeline for someone else. A younger girl, a silent boy in the corner, a stranger whose name you have not learned yet. Lena knows now that we do not get to choose the storms that come for us. We only get to choose how we breathe in the middle of them. She chose not to surrender her air. And in doing so, she gave permission for others to take their first deep breath in a long time. As you step away from her story tonight, I invite you to carry that lesson with you. Think about the moments in your own life when someone tried to take your air, through cruelty, through fear, through the weight of silence, and how you chose, or might choose, to reclaim it. And if you have been where Lena stood, or if you have watched someone else stand there, your voice matters. Share it. Let it be the thread that reaches someone who has not yet found the strength to speak. Here, in this space, your story will be heard. If you want to walk alongside us in more journeys like Lena's, stories of resistance, truth, and the kind of courage that grows in the dark, stay connected. Speak in the comments, not just to me, but to the others who gather here. And if you feel these stories should keep being told, make sure you are here when the next one begins. Because there will always be another breath to take. Another fight worth choosing. And perhaps another door opening to a girl who whispers, "They are coming after me next." When that day comes, may we all be ready to help her choose the air she breathes.